the chamber this week. Joel is back.
Hi.
This week we're talking animation from the East. Listen as we do a deep dive into the history of anime. Enjoy as we discuss and get pedantic about the different subgenres of anime. Be frustrated as we spoil things and also probably get off topic a lot. This week we also have a special guest in the studio. Also a big congrats to Jess and Cody. Plus wackiness, cause podcasting. All this and more on Fandom Roulette. Hey everyone.
Hello.
Welcome back to Fandom Roulette. This is Joe.
I'm Joel.
Oh man. Hey Joel, how have you been?
I'm still here.
You're still here.
Yup.
Yeah, welcome back for week 2.
Yeah.
Everyone loved the Western animation episode that I haven't actually finished
They
editing
will.
and posting
Probably.
yet.
They
I'm
better.
sure they will. They will.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna be cross.
Xenotrope fans
Yeah.
or whatever.
That's not a thing,
called.
but I
What
think
was that
that
thing
might be a
called?
thing of Warhammer 40k.
What was that thing called?
The Zoetrope?
The Zoetrope.
Pretty sure the Xenotrope is what they used to punish heretics in the
I mean,
Imperium of Man.
You're probably correct.
I wish I was.
Or Xenotrope is that alien from the movie Alien. starring
yeah.
Alien. But anyway.
Xenomorph, whatever.
Yeah. So.
Excuse me.
Hey.
I'm just whetting my appetite for the pet entry that's about to ensue.
Oh, I know. It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be amazing.
So Joel, what nerdy stuff have you been up to as of late?
Well, let's see. Speaking of anime, I've been watching Natsume's Book of Friends, or Natsume Yujin Show, for those of you that prefer the language of Glorious Nippon, which should be all of
I
you.
mean, how many times are we gonna make that joke this episode?
Oh, it's too many.
roughly
embrace
too
it.
many. Yeah,
I'm
fair.
leaning into it.
That's fair. That's nice and fair. Yeah, and so I've been doing a couple of things, which is I'm like I said, I'm back in Star Trek. It's gotten really good, and I kind of started developing a character for a Starfinder campaign, which is of course Pathfinder, but in space.
Woo! Yeah, which I also did.
Yeah, I know. We're starting to develop characters, and also, who's this, Joel?
What?
Do we have
It's our smallest, fuzziest member of the podcast.
Well, what's his name?
His name is Tucker.
His name is Tucker. Hi, Tucker.
He doesn't really make noise ever unless there's another dog there.
That's fair.
So, I don't know if we could get him to say anything, but he's here.
It's cool.
So just be aware.
People know. There's a dog in the studio for
yeah,
our friends.
he's a really cute dog.
He's very cute. Oh, also, one of the major reasons why the episode isn't done outside of a certain free audio recording thing having complicated editing software named
Schmondacity?
No. Yep, okay, well, it's out there now. Is because we were at Jess and Cody's wedding.
Oh, yeah, we also did that.
Woohoo! It was a lot of fun. It was a good old wedding. Everyone had fun.
Yup.
Dancing was had by all. Food was eaten.
Did.
Deliciousness happened. And music was played.
It was.
It was almost as if we were at a wedding or something.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah. So Joel, shall we set up this week's episode just a teensy bit?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I pitched this at the end of the last session, or the last recording session. Was I started off with anime possibly on the worst possible foot.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So for those of you who are unaware, this week we're going to be talking a little bit about anime, which is it's Japanese animation that has become incredidily I
feel like
if you don't know what an anime is, this episode might not be for you.
I'm sorry. But it's anime, it's animation, but with the last part is gone.
Yeah. So there's been lots of it, and I started.
There has.
It's. We'll talk about it.
Right, you are, Joe.
It's existed for quite a while,
yeah.
And I would say even arguably compared to the West, anime, there's just so much of it, and
there is a lot,
so many genres of it, and cross age appeal and all that stuff. But the first anime I happened to watch was a little anime called Berserk.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about One Piece.
Oh.
But you're right, Berserk came before that.
Yeah, Berserk was my first anime.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I'm really sorry.
which we'll talk about in the back half when we like define scary words that I'm about to say, but
Okay.
it's technically shonen, right? It's technically a shonen
Actually,
anime.
Berserk is a seinen manga, which means that it is for older Target.
It's cool.
Did you like hear a dog
No, it's
from
fine.
across
We're
the
good.
street?
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, buddy. Yeah, Berserk is technically a seinen manga, which means that it's for an older male audience, like in their mid to late 20s and above.
The pedantry is starting.
Yeah. Although, honestly, at this point, I feel like the lines are kind of starting to blur a bit. Like,
Sure.
because if you look at something like Berserk and something like Attack on Titan, like in terms of content, there's not like a huge difference. Like, I guess Attack on Titan tends to focus on like younger, like teenage characters as a protagonist. But yeah, like I feel like the lines have started to blur a lot, particularly in recent years. But
the gore and violence are there. And so like one time I was tasked to describing Berserk to a person, and I described it like this. If you want to like get me, if you want to like dispute the point, I say,
all right.
I was like, this is when I was like super into the Game of Thrones TV show.
I
was like, and I've read all the books too. Like, you know how in Game of Thrones there's like implied rape by characters you don't like. In Berserk, there's very actual on-screen rape by characters you do like.
The only part of that I'll dispute is that why would anyone like that character?
Which I mean, but at the moment that he did it, he wasn't like actively evil yet.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking in retrospective. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. No, I'll let it stand.
Yeah, but anyways, we'll talk about that in the back. But anyway, so
you want to weigh down with all the Berserk in the front half.
Exactly.
This thing will just capsize and sink.
That's actually rule number 1 of podcasting is don't put too much Berserk.
Don't put too much Berserk in any part, but especially not the front part.
The front half. You gotta lure them in.
Yeah.
Discussion about it. So anyway, we're gonna talk a little bit about the history of anime.
Yeah.
So anime, of course, is almost intrinsically connected to another style of Japanese art and visual storytelling, which is something called manga.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be that guy who, like, says it manga to be all, like, funny. No.
Yeah.
Like, we respect other cultures on Fandom Roulette. I know you did.
Or moongoos or mangoes.
Yeah, sure. And I've called the animu and
mongooses.
Yeah, animu and Japanimation.
Yeah.
Before. But anyway, mangas are, like, I mean, I guess it's perhaps simplistic of saying this, but it's like Japanese comic books.
Yep. I mean, that's it.
So I guess right off the top, it's important to start off with this, which is, I think one of the things that makes anime so interesting and like in general is like obviously it comes from like another culture with their own very unique and distinct art style.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you've ever been to like an art museum or things like that, you can see like beautiful like calligraphy scrolls and what's that one painting? That really famous painting of the ship on the waves. And
the Great Wave at Kanagawa.
Yeah, the Great Wave at Kanagawa. Like all of their stuff is like this beautifully stylized. Now we're looking it up to see what it looks like.
I said it right.
You did?
I was really worried.
That's cool.
I did it.
But so right off the bat, it looks different than what we're used to in the West, just because it's starting off from its own unique art style.
Mm-hmm.
But manga apparently is argued to date back as long ago as the late 19th century, which I suppose isn't that crazy to think about because I think we had American comics at that point as well, like comic strips. Now, here's the thing, Joel, where I think anime is interesting as it differs from a lot of Western animation, which is there are quite a lot of animes that are like reliant on mangas coming out on like a weekly basis. So would you like to comment on that?
I was kind of thinking about that earlier today because I was just like sitting around thinking about anime. But I feel like in the West we have, animated shows that are based off of comics. Especially in the 90s there were a lot of comic shows. And I guess really all throughout animation, like last week / next week, depending on when this comes out, we were talking about like the Superman shorts by the Fleischer brothers. So there's always been a relationship there, but what's interesting is a lot of the most prominent and financially and culturally successful anime series are really closely based on ongoing manga series that are being published. So it's not just that like someone is taking like the intellectual property of like Superman, creating shorts based around it. Like a lot of the most popular anime that people are familiar with, like your Naruto's and your One Pieces and your Bleaches, are
your Dragon Balls.
On your Dragon Balls, yeah. A lot of them are to varying degrees, like almost literal panel for panel recreations of the original comic, like with the virtually the same dialogue, like just recreated in an animated form,
Sure.
like to a degree that's like it's a much closer adaptation than almost anything I think we see in the West between comics and animation.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Yeah,
and I think this is kind of an interesting thing that you're going with as well, which is like perhaps I'm wrong, but almost in like it would seem unspeakable to me in like this anime style for them like to like approach a manga artist and be like, well, what if this character flies because him doing those weird hops just doesn't look very well on an animation reel,
right?
Whereas it's like there seems to be more dialogue between like people creating original stories.
Mm-hmm.
I think another example of this is the current trend of superhero movies, where it's like you'll look at it, it's like, well, when we were developing Captain America Civil War, we were looking at like this little section of Captain America stories from like the 2000s, and we were looking at like this little section of Captain America stories from the 70s, and we kind of all smushed them together.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like in anime, like you said, it's like a direct one-to-one correlation.
Right.
And this is something we'll get into in the second half of the episode. But I keep saying that as if, but this was like an early, I would say, barrier to me watching anime. I feel, which is something we'll probably be talking about later, which is ways in which this direct correlation between anime and manga can sometimes hurt the genre. But going back, anime, according to some historians, can be traced back to as early as 1917, or maybe earlier. But the first generation of animators originally came from 1910, and these gentlemen were called the fathers of anime, and I'm going to butcher some names. So you ready, Joel?
Oh, I'm excited.
Their names were Oten Shimukawa, Junichi Kochi, and Seitaro Kitayama, which, you know what? I think I did better than
you did. I don't actually know any of those guys.
But these were like the first sort of wave. And then we have anime coming from propaganda films.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which, interestingly enough, I have seen clips of when I had an internship at the National World War II Museum down in New Orleans. They had this really fascinating, in my opinion, sort of panel that was comparing Japanese propaganda and American propaganda. And one of them was animation. And so one of them was one of the most shockingly racist things I've ever seen in my entire life, which this was the Western one, which was like the Popeye.
The Popeye? Yeah, short. I thought you were going to say that.
You're a sap, Mr. Jap.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
It was the 40s.
It's on YouTube if you want to look it up.
And be horrified.
I mean, is that... I don't think it's owned by Warner Brothers, but, like, sort of a tangent. Like, to Warner Brothers' credit, they've released, like, a lot of those early, just, like, supremely racist shorts with, like, a disclaimer that, like, like, it's wrong and it's not, excusable or anything, but, like, they're not trying to, like, hide it either, like, destroy the evidence that they produced these things. So, like, yeah, a lot of those early racist and just, like, really incredibly, I don't know, like, nationalist shorts are available on YouTube, and it's interesting. I remember we spent, like, a little while, like, watching them one time through, like, various recommendations and stuff, and, like, it is pretty interesting.
Another studio that really did a good job with that was Disney Studios, where they had John Lasseter. Not John Lasseter. Film critic. Why am I blanking on his name?
Roger Ebert.
Not Roger Ebert. The other big
Siskel,
one.
Roper.
No. He had the
Leonard
book.
Maltin.
Leonard Maltin.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
We did it.
It was. It was Leonard Maltin kind of giving setups for all of these different shorts. I think it was Leonard Maltin at least.
Sounds like something he would do.
Including like the one where Donald has a dream that he's in Nazi Germany.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. And they're like rationing everything.
Yep.
He has like secret butter and like a safe in his house or whatever.
Yeah. So Japan also has early examples of animated propaganda.
Yeah.
From what I remember, the character almost looked like a little mouse boy.
Huh.
I could be wrong. That's how it kind of looked like to me, because I really wasn't necessarily paying attention to what was on the screen. Because I was kind of walking through quickly. But there were, images of, the Japanese flag, the rising sun.
Right.
Sort of clips of an army marching, things like that. During the 1930s, we start seeing, so one was called Kumo to Shuripu. So let's see if
Kumo to Tulip.
See if I can just look that up real quick.
Yeah. Cloud and Tulip. Oh, a spider.
Well, this is a different one that I remember then.
Okay.
Maybe it's Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors. Yep. There we go.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing this.
And so, this is something we didn't necessarily get into last week. But, I just think it's kind of an interesting thing to bring up because it seems like there was more of a emphasis on propaganda in early anime.
Yeah.
Which, we did briefly touch on, I think, last week. But not to the same level.
Yeah. Well, because, it's interesting, because, it was being created for, a purpose.
Sure.
So it's, a lot of new technology, yeah.
And as we just mentioned, Western studios were doing it as well. There's that famous Bugs Bunny sketch where he fights, a gremlin.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But, jumping ahead, then we get the creation of two still pretty popular and prominent animation studios, which is Toei Animation and Mushi. Is Toei the Musketeer Cat?
I think it might. I know Toei is one of the studios that has the rights to Dragon Ball.
Okay.
So they're a pretty big deal.
Now, one of the things that I was reading, which I thought was really
interesting. They are Musketeer Cat, yes.
They are Musketeer Cat? That's what I thought.
It's important.
Yeah. You see that Musketeer Cat and you just smile. You're in for a good time.
He's a good cat. Yeah.
So here's the thing. Toei style to modern anime, their biggest contribution was something that is referred to, and at this source at least, called the money shot.
Oh.
Which is a cost-cutting method of animation, which puts an important shot by putting the main focal character in focus, where everything in the background isn't necessarily quite as detailed.
Oh. That makes a lot of sense.
And according to this, this would lend its Toei started lending its talents to other things like Marvel production, DIC Entertainment, which was really important to our childhood.
Oh, yeah.
Hanna-Barbera, as well as others. Deke, that's how they said it.
Deke.
And in the 60s, some really popular early animes were, of course, Astro Boy.
Oh, yeah.
Lupin the Third. Which I would not know if not for another anime that we watch.
Yep.
Kimba the White Lion, which you might know as being Lion King Stole It.
Yep. My mom was a big fan of Kimba the White Lion.
Redacted.
Back in the day. Oops.
And then also, I would argue most famously, although I'm sure that there might be some pushback on this one, but Speed Racer.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I would say, and this kind of leads to a good segue that I was meaning to bring up earlier.
Sure, go for it.
Because Astro Boy and Kimba the White Lion are both by a guy named Osamu Tezuka, who is, often referred to as, the godfather of anime.
Sure.
He, invented Astro Boy, and he did Kimba the White Lion, and he also created, Blackjack. He's generally considered, the godfather of manga. Because he was an artist, and I was just looking him up earlier. He was born in like 1928, so he really kind of got it on the ground floor. And when he was growing up, like the really early Disney cartoons were very influential.
Sure.
So he's often considered responsible for kind of carrying over a lot of the elements in like the manga art style that can be traced back to like the Disney lineage,
Sure.
such as like the huge eyeballs and like the facial shapes and stuff, and some of the features that kind of bridge like those two worlds. And especially in the earlier stuff, like Astro Boy, if you've ever seen, like, if you look up a picture of Astro Boy, like, you can definitely very clearly see the Disney inspiration.
Sure.
Because it's much more stylized than, like, even a lot of modern anime.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, his stuff was super influential. And you can tell because they made a joke about him in Gintama. We were watching it the other day.
Yep, they
So
did.
it was like, yo, that's how you know it's important.
And you can kind of see his influence in, like, especially the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you go to if you go to like the wiki page for anime, like the image is literally just that anime eye.
It's a big old eyeball.
Big old eyeball.
A lot of highlights in it.
Mm-hmm. And then this is something we'll probably get into later as well. But like, I feel like eyes are the most often parodied aspect of anime.
For sure.
Even down to the very popular Strong Bad Email series. Short Japanese cartoon,
right?
Where he has to have
the birth of Stinko Man,
big old eyes that cover his whole head.
Mm-hmm.
His head has to be a little bean.
Yep.
Boing. And he got big old eyes and a mouth that's very small and closed and
ridiculously huge when it's
open. And gotta have blue hair.
Gotta have blue hair.
And it's like, I mean, that's probably a direct Astro Boy parody.
I mean, yeah. Although at that point, it's almost like, when you just draw, like, a character with that face, like, it's hard not to parody Astro Boy.
Sure. 100%.
Because, like, everything is just so based off of Astro Boy, like, at some point that, yeah, but it's true. Especially because Stinko Man, it's funny you say that, because later on, they made these Flash games where, if you're not familiar with the Homestar canon,
we're going there.
We are.
I promise tangents this episode.
Oh, yeah. We're, Yeah, they made those games that were basically parodies of Mega Man.
Yes. And
Mega Man is like just Astro Boy with like a helmet and a shirt.
Yep.
So like,
ooh, that's right. Astro Boy didn't have a shirt.
He did not have a shirt, which was, I mean,
anyway,
robots.
So yeah, you were saying though. So
anyways,
this early Disney style of animation leads to
what? Anime?
This thing that you were going to talk about.
Oh, this is another thing that I looked up earlier.
I thought you were going to talk about.
It's also pretty interesting.
So there was like a period where we had like a sort of rejection of that early Disney style.
Oh yeah, actually,
what is the name of that?
I forget what that is.
Well,
I can talk about this while I'm looking it up. Actually, because I thought of this when you were talking about the early propaganda shorts.
Okay.
Which is interesting because it's a manga called Barefoot Gen.
Okay. Which
was released later than I thought. It came out in 1973.
Sure.
But it's set in 45, directly after the bombing of Hiroshima.
Sure.
So it's basically about this kid who is a survivor of the atomic bomb, and he's basically like wandering the country and like trying to make a life for himself. And so it's basically a manga about like trying to survive in like post-war Japan.
Oh, interesting.
And so it was like very influential because I think it was kind of a rallying cry and like sort of a symbol of like strength that like this poor child without like a home or like any possessions or anything was basically like a symbol for Japan like rebuilding itself after the war.
That is interesting.
And there's a very famous animated version of it which includes a scene that like gets included in like a lot of like compilations and you see in like shorts and stuff, even though I've never seen the original of like the bombing of Hiroshima.
Sure.
With like this really like horrific animation of like faces melting off and like people dying and stuff and like it's really crazy.
I don't like that.
Yeah, so like it's very influential in terms of like both the art style and also the subject matter just being like really gritty but also like I think inspiring for sort of like a generation of people who are growing up on manga.
So I just wanted to issue a quick redaction real quick.
Yeah.
Apparently Lupin the Third anime didn't come around until the 70s. So
Yeah.
my apologies. I thought that was in the earlier era.
Oh, I mean, that's
anime.
true, but I feel like it's worth including in that list because the art style is a lot more like cartoony than a lot of modern anime. Like if you look up Lupin the Third, they have like really like noodly arms, kind of.
And Joel.
Yeah.
In 1974, a very important anime came out.
Oh man, what was it?
It was Heidi, Girl of the Alps.
Oh yes.
Which is apparently Heidi was very, very popular in Japan.
Yeah. As we saw.
And other. And then
during
this time,
well, I'm getting ahead of myself
a little bit, but it's fine. During this time, also Japanese animation reached continental Europe. And they started doing like cross productions.
Oh yeah.
Between various European and Japanese animation studios.
A lot of French-Japanese co-productions.
Yes,
as we've talked about.
Most famously being Odysseus, like
Ulysses 31 or something like that. I think.
Oh, it was Ulysses, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which was bad.
I
watched the first episode.
I don't know. I feel like it's from another time. Has a really good theme song.
It has a great theme
You
song.
should look
but
it
doesn't
up.
save it from it being bad.
I don't know. I thought it was alright. But yes,
and then
that was a show.
In the 80s, we start seeing a move towards, late 70s, early 80s, we start seeing a move with adding some mecha animes.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Mobile Suit Gundam.
Most famously. 1979.
And then a little bit earlier than that, but we have Space Battleship Yamato.
Yep. Yeah. So interestingly, Mobile Suit Gundam is probably like the most famous mecha anime in the West. But
I'm so excited.
There's like a long history of mecha anime before that. But they were what is now referred to as the super robot genre, which is sort of an extension of the superhero genre, except instead of having a secret identity, the hero has like a secret giant robot. But I think the first one, like what is often considered the first one or one of the first ones, is Mazinger Z. Which I've never watched, but is like, hugely influential and iconic, and involves like robots like flying around, like shooting laser beams and stuff. And I believe that was done by the same guy that did Devilman.
Interesting.
Which I don't think we really have the time.
I think
we should get into that. But if you want to do some extracurricular work, be my guest. But yeah, so in the 70s especially, there was this big boom of like the super robot genre, especially, I mean, even Spider-Man, right?
Yes.
The Japanese Spider-Man
Go
series.
look that one up. That's also amazing.
Incredible, yeah, which is a live-action tokusatsu series, which is like the same subgenre that produced like the Power Rangers and stuff like that. So it's like live-action with lots of special effects. But yeah, Marvel sold the rights to Spider-Man, or like they leased it or whatever.
Yeah. They straight up sold the rights to Spider-Man.
Toho, and so they made a live-action series where they gave Spider-Man a giant transforming robot named Leopardon, because that's just what you did in the 70s. They were like, well, he's got to have a robot, right? So when Mobile Suit Gundam came out in 1979, the robots were, instead of being like these superheroes, they were more like vehicles of war, like a tank or a plane or something that was like mass-produced and used for like military operations, and it basically invented what's now known as the real robot genre. So even today, you have the real robot genre. Yeah, it's true.
What?
And the super robot genre. So the super robot is things like Gurren Lagann. The real robot is like Gundam and Macross / Robotech.
I learned something new today about
anime. So there's sort of like, and they're both still really popular. So like neither of them is gone, but like you could definitely see the distinction where there's a big difference between like your Gurren Lagans and your Gundams, which I think is kind of cool.
Is Gagagar super robot?
Yeah, super.
Okay.
So like
I'm trying to like put pieces together.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And then jumping ahead a little bit into the future a little bit more, in the 1980s we start seeing some anime films trying to go across the pond. So one of them being Akira.
Ah, yes.
And then Kiki's Delivery Service from 1989. I did not realize that was that early.
Oh, I didn't realize. I thought it was a little earlier, actually.
Really? I didn't know that.
Didn't that come after My Neighbor Totoro?
I don't know.
But yeah, I guess it was around that time.
But and then of course jumping forward, even further, we have some more contemporary animes that are using even more contemporary animation styles. We start seeing a kind of breakdown into these genres, and then of course today, I would argue, and feel free to disagree with me.
All right.
Once again,
I'm ready.
I would feel at this point, anime is in like this year, the year of our Lord 2017, 2018, like anime has become incredibly popular. Like I feel it's moved from subculture to culture.
For sure. Definitely more so than before, anyways.
Sure. I mean, we've had some animation films winning like Academy Awards.
Yeah.
Spirited Away being one.
Yeah, that's true.
Ghibli.
Yeah, Studio Ghibli. I mean, I feel like it can't really be overstated how much of an impact their films have had in that process. Sure. Because like those are like the movies that like you could be like, hey, to tell your like a coworker, like, you like the Howl's Moving Castle, and like they'll probably know what you're talking about.
Sure.
Whereas before that,
it was like you walked up and be like, have you heard of like
the Castle of Cagliostro featuring Lupin the Third?
Okay, that was cool. Yeah. It was thematic. I liked it.
I'm doing, yeah.
All right. So yeah, anything else you want to add to the history of anime? Oh, did you find out what the name of that art style was called?
Yeah.
Going back real quick. So in like in a rejection of the Disney style, there was an art style called.
Yeah. So this is a style called Hetauma, which was an underground manga movement in the 1970s.
Yep, that makes sense.
In like some kind of, I don't know, like underground magazine.
Sure.
And Hetauma can be translated as bad but good, which is great because it's deliberately intended to look like it's poorly drawn, but it still has like an aesthetically conscious quality to it. So it's sort of like they're drawing it in like a crappy way, but one that is like very expressive, to kind of contrast with like the really polished and like streamlined look of like mainstream manga at the time.
Sure.
I guess like if I had to compare it to something, I would say if you ever seen the comics of like Robert Crumb, who was like sort of an underground comic artist in I think the 70s. It has like this very like gritty kind of like off-kilter style.
You know, this makes perfect sense to me in a way, because I feel like our 70s kind of line up pretty closely in that it was like
the 70s
kind of a rejection of certain aspects of things that
traditionally held values.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is interesting. And the reason that actually Joe remembered it, I had actually totally forgotten about this, but I first heard about this art style in an article about the anime Mob Psycho 100, which is based off of a webcomic, but it has a very interesting and unique art style that's really recognizable, and it's based off of this movement from the 70s where the characters are like kind of have these like weird, not super detailed designs and kind of these like odd, sometimes like asymmetrical or kind of like ugly looking features.
Very jagged.
Yeah, but it's really cool, and there's not really anything else I've seen like it. Certainly in modern animation. So yeah, that was a good callback.
That was the reason I thought about it. Was I remember you mentioning that it was in almost a direct rejection of that like more Disney-fied style of anime. So I think it's time we move really quickly into the middle section, just briefly. Do you want to give me like a cool anime style backing?
Yeah.
Just like. Middle section.
With the bees and the eagles.
Okay, middle section.
Middle section.
All right, so anyway, guys.
Middle section. Middle section.
All right. Welcome to the middle section. In the middle section, we tell you about how you can follow us. If you like the craziness that's happening right now, I mean, Cody's going to be back next week. But who knows? Maybe this is a secret pilot episode.
Secret pilot episode. Yeah, we were all thinking it.
Yeah. You can please send us emails at fandomroulettepodcast@gmail.com. That's how you can ask us questions that we'll answer.
Yes.
When we're doing our more traditional, like, 4-act structure. And not just, like, rambling about anime for, an hour. Yeah. And then on Twitter... It is FandomR_podcast. That's where I do most of my things. And then we're on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes. We're on places where you can find your podcasts. Please rate, review, download, subscribe. All of those things that podcasters tell you to do to bump our arbitrary numbers so we become more popular, and then we can keep doing this for fun and entertainment. And I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Joel for doing these episodes with me. They were a lot of fun to record.
Aww.
Not so fun to edit, but hey,
whatever.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was the end of the middle section. So in true anime style, we're gonna have a middle section bumper. So middle section. All right. So do you want to give some terminology before we start dropping into animes that we've watched?
Sure. Where should we start?
Sure. So why don't we start with the most popular, arguably the most popular or most well known subgenre of anime, which is
the shonen anime. It makes money. A lot of it.
So shonen, as far as I'm aware, is called shonen because it is mangas that are published in a magazine called Shonen Jump.
Yeah. Well, shonen just means a young boy.
Oh, okay. So yeah.
But yes,
these are the animes that you are probably most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So your Dragon Balls, your Narutos, your One Pieces,
your Bleaches,
which often features a either late, early teen, mid-teen, or late teen character. But let's be real, they're almost always 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And they're super duper powerful, and they're the chosen one.
They try really hard. Sometimes they goof off, but they secretly try really hard.
They all have one secret motivation. It's usually eating.
To become the samurai king.
Yeah, to become the king of
also eating.
Yeah, to become the king of whatever, or to become the most powerful.
Yep.
Or to unlock the secret. And so yeah, these are incredibly popular animes just because they make lots of money, and the market doesn't lie, so people make a lot of shonen animes get adapted to, or shonen mangas get adapted to anime.
Yes.
Now, in an almost, I would argue, flip of that, we have shoujo.
Yeah, which just means a young girl.
Yes. So is shoujo and magical girls one and the same, or is there a distinction at this point?
No, I would say for sure shoujo was a thing before magical girls were a thing.
Okay.
And magical girl I feel there's some crossover there.
Sure.
There's some magical girl stuff that's obviously made for men or older men because they realized that was a thing. So there's not a 1-to-1 correlation. Yes, yeah, it's not great.
Yeah.
So there's not a 1-to-1 correlation. It definitely started out as being targeted towards girls.
Sure.
Nowadays it's a little more. I don't know if they're playing kind of fast and loose with it.
Can you think of any famous shoujo animes?
Sailor Moon.
I mean, well, that's why I asked the question about.
Well, okay, yeah,
girls.
you're right. I mean, there's a lot, but probably one of the most famous ones is the Rose of Versailles, which was manga from I don't know, I want to say the 70s.
Okay.
And it involved intrigue in the French court, and a woman disguising herself as a man who was a noble prince.
Whoa.
Who does sword stuff.
What?
Yeah,
That's
a girl
so
raises a man
Shakespearean.
to become her father's successor as the lead of the palace guard.
That trope.
A brilliant combatant with a strong sense of justice. Her name is Oscar. She's proud of the life she leads. It was published in 1973. Yeah.
Cool.
So it was a pretty early shoujo manga, and I think it pioneered a lot of sort of the tropes that we see today, which is cross-dressing in a man's role.
Okay.
Not they didn't really have any of that. I don't think there were any supernatural elements as that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But just a lot of character drama.
Sure.
And a lot of romantic subplots. And almost sort of a Shakespearean emphasis on cross-dressing and concealed identities and stuff like that. Which is interesting. Yeah, it's definitely it's not as center stage in terms of pop culture as shonen is, but
Sure. Well, then
yeah, it's very recognizable.
Then
it's certainly
famously,
influential.
or I don't know how famously, I don't actually know how popular this one is.
Uh-huh.
You have a weird, almost 3-part hybrid anime.
Oh yeah.
Called
Escaflowne. Yeah.
It's called The Secrets.
The Vision of Escaflowne, I believe.
Which is kind of a shoujo and also kind of a shonen and also kind of a mecha anime.
Right, which is interesting. I believe it was like a late 90s, early 2000s kind of era. And so, like...
The animation would certainly inform that.
Yes, for sure. And so, yeah, I find that really interesting. It was not based on a manga. It was sort of engineered from the ground up as an anime, which kind of probably explains, like, the hybrid approach they took to it, since it was kind of, like, designed to appeal to, like, a certain audience. And I think there was, like, a lot of difficulty in getting it produced because people weren't really sure how to balance the different elements of it.
Sure.
But, yeah, as far as I know, it's, like, quite popular.
Okay.
At least with people that, like, enjoy anime.
Sure.
It's, like, often cited as, like, an example of, like, really quality anime from that time period.
We started it. It was quite good. We never finished it, but we started it.
Yeah, but it's definitely interesting the way they combine some of the tropes from both of the different genres.
We have the mecha genre, of course, which Joel briefly gave us a taste of.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a difference between
super robots and real robots.
It's
almost kind of a subgenre of the shonen demographic, I would say.
I would say so.
Like, almost all robot anime is geared toward boys and feature, like, relatively young protagonists who are like, I found a robot in my backyard, and I'm the only one who can pilot it because of plot reasons.
With, like, love or
justice,
spirit
or if you're in a Gundam, just because, like, you have the manual.
Sure. Oh, really?
That did
That's
literally
actually
happen.
a refreshing take on how
honestly, if
work
they
in
had stuck
anime.
with that, it would have been better. But you know,
did they drop that too? And then we have
opinions.
What?
I know.
You have opinions about anime?
I meant to tell you sooner, but it just didn't feel like the right time.
And then, is there like a special Japanese term for slice of life animes?
Probably.
Okay.
But I don't know off the top.
Then there's slice of life animes.
Yeah. Or as they sometimes call it, cute girls doing cute things.
Sure. Well,
I guess that's sort of an intersection with the moe
phenomena.
Okay. But yeah, there's a lot of overlap there.
A couple ones that we've watched. We'll get into this later, but there was Sound Euphonium, which was about girls in a band.
Yep.
There was the one that you told me about just like producing anime.
Yeah, honestly, if you're interested in learning about how anime is made and you like watching anime, I would highly recommend a show called Shirobako, which is, as Joe mentioned, an anime about making anime.
Sure.
And it's actually quite detailed and, as far as I know, like, pretty accurate in how the anime production process works.
Yeah, it doesn't look like they sugarcoat it in any way.
For sure, yeah.
Nor does Sound Euphonium sugarcoat the intensity of a band.
Hell no, yeah.
So yeah, these animes don't tend to have anything super duper extravagant like super power moves or like a lot of that like trope-y things that a lot of people associate with animes.
Yeah, they're not generally like heavily plot driven.
No, they're just slice of life.
They're about characters interacting.
Would you say something Kun is always listless is a slice of life?
Oh, Tanaka-kun is always listless? Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
That one probably even more so because he actively attempts to have as little of a plot as possible.
But there's like a meta commentary to it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Any other major genres that you can think of? History, animes, I suppose. Although
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's kind of interesting the way that the anime is categorized.
Sure.
Is a little like kind of different from a lot of media because it's explicitly broken down into demographics first, and then usually genres. So like we have like shonen, which is for like boys, and then shoujo, which is usually for girls, and then seinen, which is for like older men, and then josei, which is for older women.
Okay.
And so those are kind of like the core like demographics, and then inside of those demographics, like you have different genres like your mechas.
Yep.
For your boys and like your magical girls, which is often in the shoujo camp and stuff like that. But like, yeah, there's sort of like these demographics that are like transcend genre, I guess, because often like even if you look something up on Wikipedia, usually they'll list the demographic and the genre.
Okay.
because they're kind of like seen as separate.
That makes sense. And then one real quick thing, and I'm going to preface this with a little thing, because I know things are probably going to get heated in just a second.
Oh, I'm excited.
We here at Fandom Roulette respect all of your opinions, and we hope that you also respect our opinions.
Oh, man.
Because, hey, sometimes the internet sucks.
It's true.
We try to make this a cool, happy, fun place. There's a big debate in anime, which is subs versus dubs.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to get that out there before you got angry. So it's two kind of schools of anime watching.
The right school.
Okay.
And the wrong school.
So dubs are when a Western studio gets the rights to it, hires a cast of English voice actors, and does their best to dub over the animation to fit the hopefully the
lip flaps,
the mouth flaps.
Yeah,
of the characters on screen.
Believe it.
Yep. And my best buddy Yuke.
Yeah.
And then subs, which I know is like both of our preferred. Preferred is subtitles, where it's the original like Japanese voice actors, and there are English subtitles. I will say one of the main reasons I prefer subs over dubs is there's a couple of things, which is it's made me learn a lot about the Japanese culture, because I've learned just how much Japanese is like weird verbal, like not necessarily words,
just like utterances.
Yeah, just like utterances. I think a good example of this is most everything Kamina says.
Yeah.
And Lagen.
Yeah.
And then a lot of Gintama as well falls into this. And then, I mean,
that said, I mean, I enjoy playing up the sub versus dub conflict because I think it's funny. But I mean, in all honesty, like I don't really care. Like if people watch dubs, like that's fine. But yeah, I would say the main reason I prefer the subs is because I like learning stuff about the language and the culture. But like, if you just want to watch the show and like get the story, like you can watch the dub. Well, especially nowadays, a lot of dubs are quite good. Yeah. In terms of quality, more so than they were in the past.
Actually, one of my favorite animes we ever watched was a dub.
Yep.
Which was
Full Metal Alchemist
Brotherhood.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and like I say, that is one of the shows where I would prefer the dub. Honestly, just because the cast that they assembled is so good.
It is really good.
The original cast is also very good, but it's like some of the voices, like especially for Bradley, his English voice is amazing.
Ooh, I'm going to go on a little tangent real quick.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So I think another thing that one of the reasons I like watching the subs too is a lot of times voice actors are chosen for a reason. Which is, the show people like thought that they were the best person to bring that character to life. Right. And they bring a lot to the character that sometimes is lost. And I remember as a small child, we got the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone DVD, and there was a feature where they played one scene and they dubbed in all of the different audio. From all like the different translations that they did. Yeah. And they were all very good. Don't get me wrong. Right. But there was some really weird disconnect to see another voice coming out of Robbie Coltrane's mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's difficult to do, like
that
if
was,
you're...
That was Haggard, right? Robbie
yeah.
Coltrane. Yeah, that's what I thought. Because that other guy was mad at me. And so it's like, part of me just enjoys hearing how that original actor, even though I'm not sure what they're saying... Right. There's something about hearing how that original actor... Mm-hmm. And so, like... for instance, yes, an anime that I'm sure we'll be talking about quite extensively in just a second because we're almost done with this little section. Oh yeah, Gintama. There's a joke in one of the arcs where Gin is supposed to sing to a bunch of ghosts. Yeah, and the voice actor is not good at singing. And then in like the next episode, or maybe that same episode, there's a meta joke where the character is talking about how the voice actor's mother sent him a letter to tell him to sing better because she didn't want her son to lose the part.
She was like embarrassed that like he was singing so badly on national television.
And so like imagine watching some poor like English voice actor having to poorly sing a thing for a joke just because the original actor isn't good at singing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and it's like there's so much like cultural stuff and
Sure.
like a lot of like the intonation is just like really hard to do.
Mm.
Like one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of dubs is like there's a lot of times where, especially in like comedic scenes, where oftentimes like the straight man character will react by saying something, and it's like I feel like it's more common in the Japanese to say like a single word or like a really short phrase as a reaction to something, as like a rebuttal. Like if somebody notices something really slowly, they'll just say like slow or something. And like it makes sense because in the way like Japanese grammar works, like, you don't necessarily have to have like a subject and an object and like a verb. You can just kind of say like an adjective, and if it's clear from the context, it makes sense.
Okay.
But if you're dubbing it into English, like the character is making a really short utterance, and usually when they dub it, there's something like they have to say something like "that was so slow" or like, you know, it sounds awkward, and it's just very difficult. And like that's not the fault of the people that are dubbing it or the writers, but it's just sometimes like the pacing and like the beats of the dialogue are just really difficult to, you know, to carry over.
You know more Japanese than I do, like the actual language.
Like, yeah.
So one of my favorite games to play while watching anime with Joel is my favorite game is Untranslatable Japanese Pun. When Joel can tell part of what they were trying to say and like the words on the screen just mean nothing. Because I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on this podcast, but I've said this before. One time I saw a video of two Where's Ball players telling jokes to one another.
Yeah.
And the one player like lived and grew up in Brazil, and English is his second language, and like with almost all of the jokes, his response was like, "I don't get it."
Yeah.
And like so much of humor is like wordplay, and so it's like if you're not necessarily super duper familiar, like even if you speak it well, like if you don't know the intricacies, like sometimes a lot of jokes will go over your head.
Yeah.
And so it's like this is a prime example is the untranslatable Japanese pun. Just because it's like, hey, there maybe are some words in English, like that word in Japanese might sound very similar to another word that just won't work in English.
Yeah.
So a good example is Ketsuo
Ketsuno Ana. Yeah, like in Gintama. So, like a host or like an anchor on a news program is often referred to as announcer, which is abbreviated as Ana in Japanese. And so in Gintama, there's a character whose she's like the weather girl, and so her last name is Ketsuno. And so they refer to her as Ketsuno Ana, but Ketsu means an ass, and Ana means a hole, and no is the possessive particle. So Ketsu no Ana literally means an asshole. And so they like just kind of sneak it into the dialogue like whenever they can, because clearly the author was like, wouldn't it be hilarious if there was like a weather person whose last name was Ketsuno, but like there's no like how do you even try to like.
Yeah, and it's like if you're watching it, it's like
there's no
they
way.
often just translate it to just like announcer or like but it's like
they don't really bother.
In Japan, like you can just all imagine all the kids like going.
Yeah.
So yeah, should we talk about some of the animes that we've watched?
Sure.
So we've been talking about this one quite a lot because it's been the main one like consuming our soul, or in a good way.
Yeah.
It's a really weird, funny, bizarre show that I definitely would not start if you're a first-time anime viewer on this one. It's a show called Gintama.
Yes.
Gintama means silver soul.
Yes.
And if you change that G to a K, it means testicle.
It sure does. Yeah, I mean, what better example for the untranslatable pun than the series whose title itself is just a giant untranslatable pun?
And so, Gintama is an anime that is kind of sort of historical.
Yeah.
But also kind of not.
In perhaps the broadest sense possible.
Sure. You know, that's something I really respect. That's something I find really interesting about Japanese culture is they really like to play fast and loose with their history.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's an anime that please drop the name for it, but like.
Oh, you mean Sengoku Basara?
Yeah. The one during the Warring States period.
Let's have a party!
Yeah, and like all the horses have like fucking
motorcycle handlebars on them. Yep.
And it's like I cannot imagine anyone in America allowing that to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about this before, and I said like the closest thing I can think of is like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Sure.
But like that came out pretty recently, and we don't really have a lot of equivalent media like before that.
I would agree with that.
But yeah.
And so like Gintama technically takes place during the right before the Meiji Restoration.
Yes.
And it follows this guy named Gin and his two sidekicks, Shupachi and Kagura, and together they form the Odd Jobs Gin. When Odd Jobs is just like he'll do odd jobs.
Anything that moves the plot forward in the episode, basically.
And so it's fascinating to me because it's the most I've ever learned about Japanese culture while watching an anime. Yeah. Mainly because so much of it is humor-based, and they just love dropping references to basically all the anime.
Sometimes there'll be a whole episode which will just be like, here's a bunch of band names that were popular in the 90s.
Yeah. Here's an episode where all of the dialogue was just ripped lock, stock, and barrel from an episode of Gundam.
Yup, that did happen. But and then there's also a lot of interesting historical stuff. Sure. Like the fact that it said the Meiji Restoration meant that they were cracking down on a lot of people that were like opposing the government. So there was like a sword ban that was instituted. So unless you were like a government, like a direct government employee or something, like you couldn't carry like a katana. So the main character uses like a wooden sword, which happens to be made out of like diamond wood from an alien planet that he bought from the Shopping Channel. So they sneak in like little things.
The main antagonists are the who even knows in early antagonists and now like friendly rivalry is the Shinsengumi, which was a band of Ronin samurai from kind of like the frontier that were brought in by the shogunate to kind of act as the shogun's police force because they could be loyal.
Yeah, and they were like good at swords.
Yeah. You have historical figures where like one or two letters of their name is different to make Japanese school children fail on history exams.
Yup. Presumably. So, but it's a really interesting blend of like actual historical facts,
humor,
and just
the wackiest humor I've ever seen on TV.
And a heap and helping of pathos.
And a lot of pathos.
Just when you're least expecting it.
And then let's see, other ones. Gurren Lagann was an early one.
Yep.
That's your pretty traditional.
That was another show that like became pretty popular overseas, I feel, just because like it has so much pizzazz. Yeah, for sure. It's a mecha anime, but like so soft. Turned up to 11.
So soft sci-fi. That's sci-fi.
It's the softest. Yeah, it's the superest robot.
It's like a nice.
They don't even try.
Brie.
Oh yeah, it is. It is the brie. It is the brie of sci-fi.
It spreads so nice. That one. The robots are powered by spiral energy, which might just be the human spirit.
Right. It's literally stated that spiral energy can defy the law of conservation of mass. So they're just kind of like, physics don't really work anymore. So just kind of have at it. And it's also sort of like a parody / like love letter of
robot animes.
Yeah, but specifically, I remember reading this, like the Neketsu protagonist, which literally means hot-blooded. Oh. And so a lot of the earlier Super Robot shows, like Gao Gaigar, which we watched a little bit of, and like the series that preceded it, were kind of famous for having like, these Super Robot confrontations that involve like transforming and combining mecha, but they were ultimately powered by like the main characters like Will, of like, to fight and
that shit. I eat that shit up for breakfast
and stuff like that. Yeah, which is great. And so in Gurren Lagann, they take that up to 11, where like the robot is like literally scientifically powered by like your willpower. Like there's a gauge that measures it. Like it's not a metaphor. Like they're just kind of go for it. And so they really just kind of take that archetype of the hot-blooded hero to like this logical extreme in the most incredible way, which I think is enjoyable.
We had mentioned Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yeah,
which is
that one's a pretty good.
The rare dub that we watched.
That one's kind of it gets pretty heavy like early on emotionally, but I feel like that's not bad as a starting anime, just because it's so like broadly appealing in terms of the story and the characters that like it gets you invested in it very, very quickly.
Stick through episode 4.
Yeah,
I think
that's the pump. That's the hump you gotta get over.
And so one of the cool things. So, okay, I think this might actually be an interesting point for a brief tangent.
Sure.
Which is one of the reasons Joe was so hesitant to watch anime until basically he graduated from college.
Ah.
So, Fullmetal Alchemist is a fascinating example of one of the biggest problems of anime, which is what Joel and I talked about at the beginning, which is it was directly connected to a, in theory, monthly manga.
Oh, yeah.
And so, as the original production was happening, when they ran up to and bumped into the source material, basically the anime studio decided that they were just going to start telling the story the way they wanted to tell the story.
So the author pretty much gave them license to kind of come up with their own ending, essentially.
And so then she finishes the story she wants to tell. And then was it the same studio or was it a different studio?
I'm not actually sure. I know a lot of the voice actors reprise their roles.
Yeah. Basically what happened is they basically redid the anime, but with the ending that she wanted them to do. Mm-hmm. And I know there are people out there who really like the original one better than they like Brotherhood.
Yeah.
I've not actually watched the original one.
I haven't finished
only watched Brotherhood.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really interesting example and take, which is very similar to the way that HBO handled Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is, the only major difference is Game of Thrones, George R. R. Martin told them basically what the ending was and let them, like, make their own, like, trail to get there.
Yeah.
Whereas his is probably going to be different than what the shows ended up being. But in most cases, when an anime runs up to the manga, they do some things, which is very serious stalling.
They throw in some filler. And it's interesting. I found it funny that when you were reading about Toei Studio, they mentioned like all their cost-saving measures.
Yeah.
Because like Toei are like the masters of filler. Like, they have so many dirty tricks. It's almost kind of impressive. Like,
So, I remember as a kid, when I was a wee lad in grade school, I would sometimes watch Toonami.
Yep.
And
I'm sure many of us,
sure, that's like a lot of people's like
it was quite formative
entry point to anime,
right?
And one of the ones that they played was Dragon Ball Z.
Ah, yes.
And there would be full episodes of just a guy standing there and shouting and channeling his power move. And so, as a child, I was watching this and I was like, wait a second. I just watched an entire episode of a guy, like, basically shouting.
Yep.
What is up with that? And so that kind of turned me off of the genre for a really long time.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about, like, one of the most notorious examples in recent anime history?
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely the one, like, One Piece is just, man, they have it nailed down to an art form. It gets to the point where, like, when you watch One Piece on a streaming service like Crunchyroll, pretty much the top comment on every episode is just a single timestamp, which is usually around like 5 to 7 minutes, which indicates where the episode actually starts.
Yes.
Because before every episode, they have a very long opening song, and then a very long introduction to the series, which I would argue is perhaps a little silly when you're starting an episode like 556.
But it's like that whole, like, comic book thing.
But,
like,
yeah.
The Fantastic Four were, like, 4 adventurers.
4 adventurers, yeah. So they have, like, a big, like, introduction to the setting, which lasts a couple minutes. And then they usually have a very long recap section. So that burns, usually 5 to 6 minutes, which is, like, almost a quarter of the episode's running time.
Yeah.
And then, they just kind of... So they have it to the point where... And then usually within the episode, there's a lot of flashbacks to recent episodes. A lot of, like, static shots of characters reacting to things. Like, if there's 8 characters in a room and something happens, you'll get, a 4 to 5 second shot of every character's face in a close-up in sequence, like, without fail. Just, like, really amazing, almost dizzying array of, like, budget and time-saving measures. to the point where it gets kind of ridiculous.
And so that was an initial thing that had kind of turned me off of the genre. I think that the Full Metal Alchemist story is a really interesting one.
Yes.
Because it was like, now you're getting new content every week. Might not be the content that the manga writer was intending.
But I'd say that's probably preferable because at least something is happening.
Sure. And then other ones that we talked about, let me burn through some quickly. How about we just talk about ones that we've watched together? Because I know you've watched way more than I have.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Sound Euphonium, really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a group of girls. Well, it's a mixed gender school, but
there's one boy and he sucks.
There's like 2 boys.
I guess if you count the meddling cute demon, yeah.
3 boys then.
Okay.
Because there was 4. 4. Because there was drum instructor.
Oh yeah.
Meddling cute demon.
Yep.
Cool tuba guy, and the worst.
I forgot about cool tuba guy.
And the worst.
And then the worst guy.
The worst guy. I would say the joke, but
yeah, it's cool.
Who knows? He might be listening.
We got it. Yeah, I would say if you're looking for like an introduction, or at least are interested in dipping your toes in like the kind of slice of life genre, which I have historically been kind of wary of because a lot of it is just sort of, I don't know. I don't want to say like vapid because I feel like that's unfair.
I understand.
But a lot of it is literally just like, as the genre is sometimes called, just cute girls doing cute things.
Yep.
And that's it. Like, there's a lot of shows like K-On! Is probably one of the most popular ones, which is also about girls who form a band after school, which is different because they have like a rock band and it's like it's like a small group, but like it's kind of similar to Sound Euphonium. In fact, it's music based.
Sure.
But like, it just never really drew me in.
Sure.
But something about Sound Euphonium is like, I think it's probably significant that it is based on a series of novels.
Yes.
So the characters actually do have a lot of depth to them. Like, they're not just, like, cute archetypes that go around and do, like, moe things.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Was watching it with me and my sister helpful?
I don't know. I feel like I really enjoyed it before we watched it together. Because I think I had watched...
You'd watched a few episodes.
A good bit of it.
I don't know if you'd watched all of it, yeah.
But definitely watching it with you added another layer to it because... It made it really clear, like, just how well done, like, the research and, like, the experience was, because it was so, like, resonant, even across, like, the cultural divide.
Sure.
In terms of the band experience.
To pull you behind the veil just a little bit, I did marching band in high school, and we were a competitive marching band that had an incredibly intense director. And he was not the same kind of intense that the professor is from Sound Euphonium.
Yeah.
But there's this whole aspect...
Just kind of a demon, really.
There's this whole aspect of Sound Euphonium that is basically like your heart, your life, your emotions are all kind of poured into this like thing, and music is kind of a beautiful... It's kind of a beautiful thing when you think about it, because it's like, often, 30, 35 plus individuals coming together to make something that's just so seamless and flawless. But it's like, if one person screws up, it's incredibly noticeable. Or if one person doesn't have the same level of like motivation, it's incredibly noticeable.
Yeah.
And so it's like, a lot of times it reaches this point where it's like 2 or 3 people kind of take charge and are like, we must make this the best it can be, and then to the point where sometimes it can become isolating to others.
Yeah, and I find that interesting, like, especially at the beginning where the director asks the band, outright, do you want to do this as, like, a hobby where you can make memories and, like, have friends, or do you actually want to try and, like, accomplish something and, like, win the national competition? And there's not, like, a right answer. Like, those are both noble goals, but if you pick one or the other, like, if you decide that you want to do something and, like, achieve something, then, like, I'm going to hold you to that. So, like, it was a very interesting perspective.
There was a year where that question was posed to us.
Mm-hmm.
It was
interesting.
It was a very intense year, too.
Yeah.
And then some more fun animes. Oh, boy, no. Okay, I'm not going to say the next thing I was going to say, because that's not fun anime at all. But an actual fun anime.
Okay, well, we're going to have to get back to that later.
We'll circle around to that.
All right.
Don't worry.
Just promise me.
Yeah, don't worry about it. You'll know when I say it. You'll be like, oh, good call not saying that one.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Going back to a fun anime. The second one I thought of also is not really a fun anime. Oh, boy, Joel.
What
Help me
is
out.
fun? I don't know
Give me out
anymore.
of this nosedive. I was gonna say Attack on Titan, which is not a fun anime.
Well, it's
by any-
funner than some things.
Sure.
But
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
Attack on Titan. I feel like this is the anime that really kicked off.
Yeah.
It's the most popular anime in the West that I can remember in my lifetime.
It has had a huge cross, cultural success.
I have argued 3 points
Mm-hmm.
that why I think that is the case, which is it drops a lot of shonen-y tropes.
Yes.
So there are not really ever drastic art styles, which I have grown to love.
But is one of the biggest jarring things when you start. Yeah.
Yeah. So by that we mean when one character gets really big and 2 other characters get really small, and they get those little wave lines on their forehead. Or
not even
not
even the art style as much as the shift in the art style, which just doesn't happen really until we get things like Teen Titans, which did that, and it was a big deal at the time because that wasn't really a thing in a lot of Western animation. But yeah.
Attack on Titan
doesn't have that.
Really solid show.
Mm-hmm.
Very intense. Very good storyline.
Really well drawn characters.
Really well drawn characters. Really well written characters. Little fascist.
Yeah, a little bit fascist.
A little bit fascist.
Fascist for your money. Yeah, but it sounds like the anime is kind of trying to pump the brakes on that a little bit as far as the original author is concerned, which I give them credit for.
Yes, 100%. In the even less fun, we have Madoka Magica.
Okay, yep. That's,
which was the second one I thought. I was like, that's not fun, Joe.
Yeah, it's not fun at all.
Madoka Magica is a subversion of the magical girl genre of anime, in that it shows you that magical girls... I mean, I really don't want to say too much about this one, because I don't want to spoil this one.
Yeah, but just know that you're getting in for, so, regardless of what your opinion on Watchmen, the graphic novel...
Sure.
Imagine a Watchmen-like deconstruction of the magical girl genre.
There you go.
And you're not that far off from what you're going to get from this series.
And then a fascinating aspect about Madoka, in my humble opinion, that one's actually really short. It's 12 episodes.
It is, yeah,
right?
12, 13 maybe.
The first episode has a completely different intro and outro song.
That's
which
true.
Makes it look and feel like your more traditional magical girl anime.
Well, I think they keep the intro song.
Oh, do they?
They keep the ridiculously
they do
incongruous intro song, but the outro song, which is super intense and amazing, and one of my favorite anime songs,
feels very reminiscent of Toho.
Is different, yeah.
Or whatever that game series is.
Yeah, no, that's a Toho.
Toho.
Which that's a separate podcast.
Oh, that's 100%.
Podcast. The other thing is Madoka.
Yeah.
Magica. Oh, yeah, interesting side note. So, just as to kind of give credence to, our warning that maybe you should be in, pretty good mental state before you attempt to watch the show, without giving too much away, when it was originally being, fan-subbed in the West, because there was not, an official release yet, which is when vigilante subtitlers, get a hold of the raw footage and they put their own subtitles over it.
Sure.
When that was originally released through various illicit channels, they left the commercial break in a few of the episodes.
That's right.
So in the middle, where you would normally have the bumpers which would signify the commercial break, they left in a commercial break for an early morning energy drink / hangover cure called Morning Rescue, featuring men in brightly colored rescue worker outfits rappelling down from the ceiling of an office building to deliver this orange flavored drink to put upon office workers, featuring an awesome theme song and Morning Rescue. Yeah, it's great. But then later, several episodes in, when the subtitles actually started removing the ad, people got really upset because it was the only bit of levity to break up the horrible soul-crushing, emotional sledgehammer that was the rest of the show. So they actually put it back in, even in episodes where the Morning Rescue commercial wasn't originally aired.
That's hilarious.
They took the footage from earlier episodes and spliced it in because
good.
people needed that break.
All part of Keikaku.
But anyway, yeah, translators know. Keikaku means plan.
So that's a good one.
Yep.
I've not yet finished Cowboy Bebop, which I know is sacrilege because
Yeah,
that seems to be like the anime that people who don't like anime have seen.
Yeah, that's accurate.
And now there's me, a person who does like anime, who hasn't seen the anime that people who don't like anime have seen.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I feel like it's gotten to the point where people might overhype it just because it's so well known. But I'd say most of the hype is pretty deserved.
Sure.
Like, yeah.
Any other major ones that we're missing? We've watched a lot of anime.
Yes.
Ooh, we've watched one episode of a great anime that I don't want to watch anything else because I don't want to ruin it in my mind, which is Food Fight.
Oh, yeah, Shokugeki no Soma.
Yeah.
Food Wars.
Food Wars. So my apologies. Not Food Fight. That's the bad.
That's fighting food odds.
That's the bad animated movie from a year.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I was thinking of the show that was on the short-lived Fox box that attempted to compete with Kids WB.
Oh God, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's a pretty deep cuts over here on the Fandom Roulette.
Oof.
But
yeah, look at that.
Oh, you fighting food odds,
look at the blood flowing.
Oh yeah.
So that one is the anime where a guy makes food so good that when people eat it. It cuts to them having their clothes blasted off their
explode,
body, and then they just like cry with how tasty it is.
Which, like, a lot of people that I respect and generally trust their opinion on have like watched the whole thing and are like pretty into it. But I agree with you. I feel like the one episode that we watched and like just kind of getting like a little like taste of it is like so good that I almost don't want to spoil it.
Almost
by
as
watching
if
the
like
rest.
We took a little taste and our clothes exploded.
And we were like, let's call it a night. Yeah,
there's an episode where they were trying to create a food with the best fragrance inside of it.
Yeah,
and then at one point, both of the protagonist and I'm gonna guess
Sasuke.
There's
really no better way to put this. He's just the Sasuke.
The protagonist and the Sasuke have like fucking iron knuckles and are like boxing one another. Oh, it was so weird.
Oh yeah, his flavor style is like a series of consecutive combo attacks.
You know what? Much like Star Darlings.
Oh, you're right.
It was the season 2 finale.
Yeah.
Of Food Wars.
Wow.
And then we've watched
a little bit of callback there, or foreshadowing, depending on which order these episodes get posted.
Sorry, Cody.
Yeah. I've been meaning to bring up Legends of the Galactic Heroes for a while.
Oh yeah, bring it up.
But I don't know. Yeah, because when you're talking about Sound Euphonium, which is a little bit different than a lot of anime that gets produced because it was based on a series of novels.
Sure.
Which I feel like really shows in terms of the source materials had a lot of depth.
Pacing.
The pacing, they were a lot more free because they weren't adapting it like scene to scene.
Yeah.
I'd assume like a lot of manga are. And then another fairly famous, or at least
popular,
distinguished, I guess, series that was based on a series of novels is Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which I believe until now has never actually seen an official English language release in any format. So
wait, no, that's not right. Because we're watching one on Crunchyroll.
Oh, the new one. Yeah, that's true. Like the remake.
Okay, you're talking about
the remake is being like simultaneously. Yeah, that's one getting an official release. But the original one was a series of OVAs, which is basically just the anime term for like direct-to-video episodes in the late 80s and early 90s. Went up to like 110 some episodes. It's the longest ever OVA like ongoing series. And it's based on a series of sci-fi novels by a professor of Japanese literature, I believe, which are really good. A lot of characters, like a lot of like political stuff. Like there's a lot of space battles, but they're honestly, I would say, probably like the most boring part of the show.
Sure.
I think like the intrigue and the character interactions are more interesting. And there's a lot of really interesting like commentary on like war and like societies, like democracy, how it turns into, different kinds of totalitarianism, stuff like that.
One of the things I really enjoy about it is this sense that you have an empire and you have the like scrappy rebellion, free planet society.
Right.
They're both bad in their own ways, and they're both good in their own ways.
Yeah, like
obviously
there's not
you don't
a clear cut.
Obviously, you don't want to like support the empire because like they're fascists,
right?
But like, it's not like the other side as like these like good noble characters who are like worthy.
There's a lot of crappy people on both sides, and it's like it's a really great example of like having dual protagonists.
Yes,
because both of the protagonists are so different. They're incredibly different, but they're both like upwardly like mobile like military officers who are like brilliant and are basically trying to like reform the society that they're in, and like they never actually meet each other. So actually, Joe pointed out, we were watching it, they kind of have like a Wrath of Khan relationship where they have sort of this rivalry, and like
pretty good point, Joe.
Yeah, good job, Joe. Like they have this rivalry, and they see each other's influence, and like they kind of get to know each other based on how they perform in like battle and like political maneuvers, but like they never actually meet in person. So
which is rad.
Yeah,
that's
it's
my
a lot
favorite
of really
kind
cool
of thing.
stuff. The original OVA is amazing, and I love it, but it has the animation is bad.
They do some cross-cutting measures.
But like it's not great, so it's difficult to get into. And there's like a million characters with like a bunch of different names.
A lot of them have very Germany names.
But they're actually currently producing a remake of the series with like very good animation, which is available on Crunchyroll and probably some other places. If you're interested in checking it out, Legend of the Galactic Heroes, I highly recommend it.
Ooh, I forgot, Joel.
Oh, yeah.
I think we should end on this one.
Sure.
Because this is an important one.
Yeah.
It's a show that's very near and dear to my heart.
It's not Berserk, is it?
No.
Oh, thank Christ.
We talked about Berserk at the beginning.
Okay, that's enough.
Berserk's Dark Fantasy. Check it out if you hate yourself.
Yeah.
and don't drink a handle of vodka.
Okay, you know what, Joe?
Obviously, Joe.
That was one time.
It's the most important anime.
I got banned from the Pony Forums 24 hours. Wasn't that punishment enough?
It's, of course, a little show called
Seiko Boy.
Samurai Pizza Cats.
Okay.
Oh,
I
wait.
thought you were going to say Seiko Boys.
Drop it. Not Samurai Pizza Cats.
Cancel Samurai Pizza Cats.
We're doing Seiko Boys. Seiko Boys is the best anime ever.
It's a masterpiece.
And all we're going to say is...
I laughed, I cried.
You should go watch it, because literally anything we say is too much.
Is too much. Yeah, just look it up. SEKKOBOYS. Seiko. You're going to have the theme song stuck in your head.
Forever.
You're going to hate and love as much as you love and hate yourself.
Yeah. Whoa, nice Gollum reference.
It just kind of slipped out. Yeah, it's on Crunchyroll.
It's on Crunchyroll.
You have no excuse.
They're 10-minute episodes.
Yup.
Right? 10,
if that,
10, 11
honestly.
episodes.
Yeah.
You can binge an entire season.
You can binge the season like an hour and a half, maybe.
Oh, and then, I guess, man, I'm like breaking my own rule here, Joel.
Oh, yeah.
And then, there's one more.
Okay.
There's one more, which is arguably the Descendants: Wicked world of anime.
Oh, yes. Ikemen Sengoku bromances across time.
Which is an anime, a 3-minute anime.
Based on a mobile phone game.
That has, like, the weirdest, blockiest...
Giant-headed,
chibi-style historical figures.
Amazing.
Who have bromances with one another.
Yup.
And then the last thing you see after the theme song is, like, a very well-animated version of one of the historical figures without a shirt on, telling you to, like, come to bed with them.
Yeah, in, like, a suggestive, saucy way. And that's where they spent, like, all their budget, like, unapologetically. That's clearly what they put all the budget into.
So yeah, I think we should probably, like, start wrapping this up. We're getting
close to I think we had a pretty good run.
Yeah, it's a pretty good run.
We covered a lot of territory.
There's lots of other animes out there.
A lot more, but, like, there's some people who have just entire podcasts about animes.
Oh, for sure.
We call them nerds.
We could do that.
But yeah, we could probably just do that.
This is a service that Joel has mentioned. They're not, like, a sponsor of us or anything.
No.
But they could be.
Or, yeah.
Hit us up.
Hit us up, Crunchyroll.
Crunchyroll is an incredibly affordable streaming service that has access to, like, an unfathomable amount of
crazy amount of things. Yeah, and they're just getting more all the time. They merged with Funimation recently.
Yep.
So they got, like, a huge boost in their library.
They merged with Verve.
Yeah, that's right.
So, like, man...
Just a lot of stuff.
There's anime out there for the taking.
It's very cheap. It's like the Netflix of anime.
Yeah.
In so much as Netflix is the Netflix of anime. But yeah, it's more affordable. And
yeah, because Netflix
does have a lot of anime, but they don't have, like, One Piece.
That's true.
Or Dragon Ball.
Yes, there are a lot of ones.
Yeah.
And then
one of
the things too about Crunchyroll, not to, like, stand for Crunchyroll or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
I will if you pay us.
If you get their, like, exclusive streaming services or whatever. Episodes air within 24 hours of Japan.
Yeah, they have, like, a simulcast thing, which is really cool.
You don't have to wait for a whole season to drop, which I think is the coolest. So you can, like, keep up with an anime.
Yeah, that's right, because Little Witch Academia came out on Netflix but it was also on Crunchyroll, and people were like, they had to wait for the whole season to finish before they could watch it on Netflix or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anywho,
but anyway,
it's good stuff.
Joel.
Yes.
I'm gonna throw this one out there. This might not actually be the right word. But
I'm ready.
You are my Nakama.
You are also my Nakama. You did it.
I
That
did
was
it.
the right word. Using your willpower and hot-blooded fighting spirit, we remembered the word. It's untranslatable.
These check out ProZD if you want to understand that joke.
Honestly, yeah.
Joel, these past 2 weeks have been like super duper fun.
They have been.
I've enjoyed this quite a lot. I want to thank you so much for filling in. People are going to hear these eventually. I know. When I finish editing them. Editing's hard, you guys.
It is.
But yeah, we want to thank you so much for listening to these episodes of Fandom Roulette. Next week, Cody will be back. We'll be back to a more traditional format. We'll probably be talking more about animation because I gave Cody like 4 cartoons that I thought he would enjoy. To watch. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Go back to that middle section to learn all the different things I said, to rate, review, subscribe. And as always, signing up for Fandom Roulette, this is Joe.
This is Joel.
Tucker ran away.
He's around.
Yeah, and as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.